is not cost-free at all. So what they are doing also in their own mind, I think strategically, is hitting a lot of American bases in recent times, therefore trying to make it harder, tougher for the United States to restart a full-scale war, that those bases will be essentially not usable for US forces. So that's why we've seen an attack, for example, on a US base in Kuwait. We've seen attacks on other bases as well. So I think what we're still seeing, and I fear we're going to see this for some time, is both sides not getting back into that full-scale war that we saw in March, but a much lower level intensity conflict, whether it be, as we have seen, really, highs and lows, occasions where the talks might seem to be proceeding, as we saw over last weekend. There were mediated talks with the Omanis, but then escalating back into further clashes and strikes.
Right, and Mr. Doyle, even though it seems that Iran believes that a limited war serves its interests better than a prolonged ceasefire, who do you think is really benefiting from this limited conflict? Because history shows us that when conflicts drag on, it's usually somebody other than the combatants who end up gaining much more than the people who are embroiled in the conflict itself. Now, in your assessment, who do you think is the primary beneficiary here?
Well, I don't think there are many primary beneficiaries in the end. And I think actually the Iranian and the American leadership do want to end this. The trouble is their core fundamental red lines just don't overlap. So it's really hard for both the leaderships to pull away from those to reach the sort of compromise that is needed. Not least, of course, because there's absolutely no trust between the two of them. They've been at each other's throats. They've been bombing each other, bombing each other's allies. So, you're not going to see this. For Iran, simply.
Some analysts believe that Moscow could be on track to double its annual oil revenues. The China too could emerge stronger as countries are scrambling to secure energy supplies. Beijing is positioning itself as a stable global partner, expanding its lead in clean energy technologies and contrasting its approach with what it portrays as American unpredictability. But while some stand to gain, others are paying the price. At least 16 Indians are reported to have been killed in the West Asia war so far, including 10 seafarers. 8 of those deaths were reported in Oman. 4 in the United Arab Emirates, 2 in Kuwait, and 1 each in Saudi Arabia and Iraq.
On-off war ever since the major element of this war came to a halt, where sometimes there are American strikes, sometimes there are Iranian strikes, that Iran is also calculating here that making a cost to the United States, inflicting an economic penalty, will push it to its advantage in any talks, that it constantly has to remind the Trump administration that a failure to reach an agreement, a failure to get that sanctions relief that Iran requires, is not cost-free at all.
And to discuss this in greater detail, from London, we're now being joined by Chris Toll, Director of CABU, which is Council for Arab-British Understanding, and he's the current lead spokesperson for CABU. Thank you so much, Mr. Doyle, for joining us on the broadcast. Now, what we're seeing is a change in Iran's strategic calculus here. Instead of waiting for an American strike and then retaliating, Iran seems to be on the offensive for now, which is evident in the latest surprise strike on a U.S. base in Jordan as well. What seems to be the impetus for this change in approach for Iran, according to you?
I'm not sure there's a huge change of approach. In fact, what we have seen is this sort of on-off war ever since the major element of this war came to a halt, where sometimes there are American strikes, sometimes there are Iranian strikes, that Iran is also calculating here that making a cost to the United States, inflicting an economic penalty.
His army drone strike hits a traditional court in North Darfur, killing at least 35 people, according to a rights group. The village is under RSF control as the brutal civil war between the army and paramilitary forces continues. Argentine President Javier Milei renews his attacks on Brazil's President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, calling him a thief. The remarks deepen a diplomatic rift after Milei backed Lula's political rivals during a visit to Brazil. And pop star Ariana Grande will step away from public life after her Eternal Sunshine World Tour ends. The Grammy-winning singer is taking a break from the spotlight to prioritize her well-being amid growing public scrutiny.